I am breathing such a sigh of relief that we can finally talk about this.
Yeah, right.
You guys have been sitting on this for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, since October, one of our Q&As was actually from Cyprus because it was Key and we were recording it on my poor phone, just passing it back and forth in our Airbnb in Lefkosia. But we ended up, we teased it, we've talked about it. We said we're working on this major Aphrodite project, and we were also, we were just extremely excited about the whole idea in general. And then we were very, very careful because one of our ideas was, oh, we could put this out on Valentine's Day, just as kind of like a confluence of these events, but divination was adamantly against it. Everything needed more, and as everyone is going to hear, and we talk about this, every step of this project took a very long time to execute. We were especially methodical with
Mhm.
not just what went into it, but the prayers, the repetitions, absolutely everything that went into the blood, the sweat, and the tears, all literal,
Yeah, right.
needed its time to germinate. And now that it's ready, I'm feeling a huge sigh of relief because it's like we've been carrying it, you know what I mean, like the term, and it's finally here, our beloved offerings unto the goddess that we encountered on her very island way back then when Key and I were in Cyprus. And we were so good about not really talking about it too much. We've like mentioned it a few times, but like nothing substantial. But then the Discord server for the podcast launched as of May. And we ended up blabbing about it a little bit on a voice call with some patrons who happened to be online while he was streaming Elden Ring of all things.
Yeah, it was a very, spontaneous and very fun evening. And I think, in the spirit of that love and in the spirit of that friendship, we couldn't hold it in any longer. And the thing that we've been laboring away at and showing our, love and devotion to the deity, the goddess throughout that entire process. We had to get it out there at least a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. But yeah, really excited to finally share what we've been, spending literally every day of our lives working on ever
Hmm.
since.
Absolutely, yeah. But it is an offering of love. It is an offering of friendship. And it is an
Mhm.
offering, most importantly, unto Aphrodite, whom we've had our encounters with, I would say, all three of us in different capacities. But this was by far the most visceral. And now we can finally talk about what exactly happened after much teasing, what occurred, what the theophany that we've hinted at actually involved, and the collection that Key and I have put together in honor of our friendship and in honor of the anniversary of the podcast.
Be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Sfinga,
Hey, yeah.
Salt,
Yo,
and Betel Key. Today, my name comes to you from the, an iconographic black stones that are used to represent the deities in kind of ancient and, I suppose, a little later Greece, and most notably the black stone of Our Lady at Paphos.
And also the Omphalos and the Temple of Apollo, right, in Delphi.
Very
Yeah,
true.
those beautiful aniconic stone zoanons, really, the vessels for the gods. Bethels are so fascinating. I mean, having been in the presence of one with you, it's indescribable, the feeling
Right.
of seeing and I've always been partial to aniconic representations, which is perhaps ironic as an Orthodox. Um, but yeah, Bethels are absolutely fascinating. And I love that it comes from the Semitic root of house of God, right? Much like
Right, right.
in many modern Semitic languages, you have bet, as house.
Mhm. Definitely. The presence of the stone itself is really indescribable and otherworldly. And I suppose that definitely harkens to the origin of a lot of these things, or purported origin, as like meteorites. Like
Absolutely.
the things themselves that fall from the sky and are given by the gods to their deities and worshippers to form the central axis of the cult. And I think there's something beautiful to them being likened to like the hitching posts of horses around which
Mm.
they orbit, and that they become tethered to, and that much as the horse is tethered to the axis, the worshippers are tethered to the deity and act in service of each other.
It always reminds me of notions that when we talk about Hecate and her three-faced form, looking at each arm of the crossroads, that she's not just the crossroads, she's also the pole, the tent, the military tent that is set up. And in that way, Kerberos, the three-headed dog, is the hound that guards each road upon the crossroad, is able to not be evaded by someone coming in from behind. So it's
Mhm.
literally the world axis in that way as well.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Speaking of bees, I thought you were going to go with like basking in the divine light of the gods key in light in light of what happened to us, and especially in that one moment when the
Mhm.
sun hit you.
Oh my god, yeah. That was very intense, like was definitely considering, something along those lines, basking in the presence and glory of the goddess, or breathing in the sea breeze and shedding a single tear.
A single
The
manly tear, yeah,
Yeah. Or we could go with instead of the beach that makes you old, it's the beach that makes you eternally youthful and sexy, key,
yeah, 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 exactly.
But yeah, all that and more to come. Suppose before we get into it any further, we should do some housekeeping. Remember to check us out at twitter.com/frightful howls and patreon.com/the frightful howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and for our patrons. And we also have a Discord by and for our
Yay!
patrons.
Yeah, it's a riot already. Lots of memes, lots of music suggestions, lots of chatting about magic, plenty of video games. It's quite fun. I mean, we waited a year to launch it, and it's been so rewarding already. So if you want to come hang out with us a little bit more in a chill environment, check us out. It's part of the usual tier. Nothing new added.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been great hanging out with everyone as well, like hearing how everyone approaches their practices and like the ways that they engage with their spirits. Like, I love hearing about that stuff, man.
Yeah, and people have been asking you about the almanac and everything like that, and getting perspectives on elections and all that good stuff. It's been really fun, like fruitful to see people of different astrological backgrounds as well, coming together to kind of workshop some of these theoretical ideas.
Yeah, it's been a blast so far. It's been a blast. So, if you guys are interested in coming along, then check out the Patreon.
And of course, speaking of astrology, we have Salt's fantastic almanac every month, a guide to the stars, a guide to the days, including all manner of fantastic folklore and charms that we have heard from people are highly effective, and we always love the feedback there. We also host a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of the listener's choosing. We provide show notes for every episode and a lot more. Of course, always remember to give us a like, rating, review on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you happen to be listening to us. It really helps us fight against the demiurge of the algorithm and its infinite tendrils of manipulation.
Go go Gnostic Power Rangers.
Yeah, right. Help us name the archons that we may rebuff them by.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh man, and of course we also I'll offer services. I offer personalized coaching in magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings, talismans, tools, oils, and custom commissions thereof, all that type of thing. Svinga offers bulk and favomancy readings, and Salt offers anything and everything astrological, be it horary, electional, or natal. And he also offers incense watching divination. And last thing before we get into it, hit us up on social media. Svinga's at Dragon Cunning. Salt is at Salt CNC. That's letters CANDC. And I am barnowl.key.
At last imprisoned in social media forever.
Yeah, right.
Zuck finally caught him. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Zuckerberg already coming for us in the form of a Mohegan Saint Expedite statue, which we have all noted has an uncanny resemblance in the way that the face looks.
Mhm.
Shout outs to Mohegan at Kitchen Toad.
Yeah, right.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. I'm so excited with this episode. We mentioned it's been a long time coming, but it's truly consumed us, I would say, for the last half year, right, Key? Because for some context, I suppose, uh, Key and I happened to be traveling throughout Southeastern Europe and the Mediterranean last year. For various reasons, some of which were work related, some of which were magic related, and some of which were, a third thing, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and Salt was holding down the fortress at home, and we were sending him all of these texts and pictures of what was going on. And we had already recorded some episodes beforehand, right? This was around the time that the Photomachus episode came out, as well as the So You Think in Words. So this was like episodes 12 and 13 in terms of the
Mhm.
timeline. And because of the time zone differences and stuff like that, we were basically keeping in touch over Discord and kind of like, look, I found this interesting thing. I collected this dirt. I got these hag stones. We were doing our usual wizard stuff. And by the time we ended up in Cyprus, and keep in mind, this is a place that neither Key nor I had visited.
Mhm.
This was one part of our trip, and we would soon go to my home country, actually, where Key got to meet most of my family, none of whom speak English. So it was nice to interpret for you until all of you drank enough rakia to the point in which there was no need for interpretation anymore.
Mhm.
Um, we were staying in Lefkosia, but we also spent some time in Larnaca and a few different villages. And one thing that when we were looking over what to do, we were like, well, we have to go to Paphos, right? We have to go to Kuklia specifically to see the most famous and most prestigious temple that exists to Aphrodite. Because this is a goddess that we've had some, workings and worship of. And also, I've had plenty of experience with the faces of her that have come through in my work with Tuba Veneris, which may be a little bit controversial to say because the grimoire itself purports to put you in touch with a being that is referred to as the Dark Venus.
Mhm.
And I have had the distinct pleasure of working this grimoire for many years. And Key recently began working it as well. So did a few other friends as of last year, because there was a very good New Moon Friday that occurred, I believe in May, that it was
Yeah.
last year. Yeah. And so this was a time that a lot of us were able to really start giving me feedback, on this grimoire that I've been essentially working alone for the most part in terms of no one else was really doing it. But now people were getting into it, and all of us noted that one, the diamonds don't necessarily appear in the ways that we thought they would. They have very
Mhm.
nymph-like quality. And two, that the Dark Venus herself has continually been revealed to us to be an epithet of Aphrodite. And so what I would say was really interesting, especially in our workings with this, is that my relationship with my worship of her has continued to deepen. And it's interesting too because Venus is, a planet I would say, or planetary power that I've had a lot of dealings with, specifically for friendship and for community. Many people have like messaged us recently, especially on the Discord, saying that I mean, a huge draw to the podcast for them has been our relationship. The three of us, obviously, Salt and I are dating, and the three of us are best friends. And I would say that, it's been such a treasure to show the depth of love that we have for each other in terms of not just spending our lives together and being, extremely close as people, but also that we're always doing something. We're always making some kind of magical plan. We're sharing our materia. We are motivating each other. We are helping each other refine our mediumship. Like the three of us are a real team, you know.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of really good people around us. I mean, even the guests that we have on, our rule for them is that they have to be personal friends, you know, of all three of us. It cannot be a situation in which, you know, we don't know the person, or it's like it's really cool that they have some amazing things to share. And you know, there are many other podcasts where they can be interviewed on all manner of occult subjects, but we wanted to do something where if the dynamic between us has to kind of be there, right?
Right.
Because it's Fractal House has always been really about our friendship too. We started it for us, and we're so grateful for the amount of people who are supporting us now on Patreon, and then who are hanging out with us and are joining our community and helping build community, really. In terms of just our manic desire for communing with spirits and ever more accurate and increasingly more powerful results in operative sorcery, and being ambitious about what you want out of magic and then not settling for less. So I would say those Venusian powers of attraction and generation and germination and fertility have been exceptionally important to all of us, especially in the ways that we met quite randomly, you know, all three of us online and soon to be all living together, you know. So it's one of those things that I would say, you know, the love that I have for the two of you is genuinely impossible to describe for me. You know, it's
Mhm.
absolutely the defining feature of my incarnate existence really is the relationships that we have with each other and with our closest friends and with our families and found families and so on. And so when we got to Cyprus and I was telling Key, I was like, listen, we have enough time. Let's take the intercity bus from Lefkosia to Paphos and take the next one to Kuklia. I want to see the sanctuary. I want to, and I had the magician's mindset, you know, of like, oh, we'll go there, we'll talk to some spirits, we'll make some offerings, we'll pray, you know, we'll learn about the site, we'll visit the museum, and then we're going to go to the beach, which we'll talk about shortly as well, which is very close to the actual sanctuary, to the temple. That
Mhm.
is the beach that has the rock that we'll be spending a lot of time discussing later in the episode, the Petrotoromio, which is the rock upon which Aphrodite is said to have been born. Um, I was like, it'll be a day trip. You know, we're going to spend some time there, make offerings and so on, and it would be nice to gather some materia. You know, we were just thinking about it as a pilgrimage, right? But it turned out to be more beyond our wildest dreams in terms of what actually occurred, and in terms of the way that this, you know, catapulted a devotion to Aphrodite between the two of us like never before. And it really is something to be not only in the place of a deity's birth, as it were, or ingress into this world, I should say, you know, given that these are also, you know, pre-cosmic beings as well. But also the pilgrimage, you know, the myth that if you go on this pilgrimage, what we did, with your lover, you'll be, you know, lovers forever. If you go with your closest friend, you'll be best friends forever, and so on. It will cement the bonds between people. I I mean, absolutely, you know, is all I can say to that. So we'll be talking a little bit about what that journey was like and what occurred. And what the kind of pact that we made to make certain offerings to share, you know, because in the spirit of Venus and in germination and in generation, it's to share the products of the wisdom that we've gained from there, to share the magic of this place with everyone listening and with those interested in potentially even purchasing some of the things that we've made. And to share in the bounty of the goddess by creating essentially a line of incenses, oils, tinctures, balms, pigments, and amulets to share with everybody as a way to not only connect to this place and in this moment, but also to invite the same level of frenzied love, of friendship, of romance, of creativity, of fecundity, of magic, and of lust and desire for magic and magical results into everyone's lives in a sense of just pushing for that kind of beyond the beyond reach of Aphrodite Urania, you know, the goddess of all, through her, really, because this is all about her. And you know, she is the star of the
Mhm.
sea, of the show, of the universe. And you know, given how long we've even, I mean, as soon as we finished, right, all we did was call Salt and talk to him about everything. And when I brought everything back, when we came back to my place, you know, where I live with Salt, like he was, you know, I mean, I would say you were going pretty you were pretty overwhelmed by the material you brought back, right? Like when you saw everything.
Yeah, I mean, receiving the updates as it was crazy enough. And then Svinga comes back home with this ginormous bundle of materia and all these stories that she didn't have time to tell me along the way. Like, it was crazy, and I loved every second hearing about it. It
You even
was,
you even had work the next day, and like you woke up and you saw like Key and I on the floor in the living room with everything sprawled out of our suitcases, just trying to like very tenderly make sure that what couldn't see sunlight was still enveloped, and whatever what needed to be labeled in jars was taken out of its ziplocs of art, as it were.
yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, you see those like fantasy films, right? Where there's these traders and they have like this blanket of stuff, and it's just like all these magical items, and that's literally what it looked like. Like, I can't explain to our dear listeners quite how it felt just walking into what felt like was once our living room and was now a magical bazaar. It was amazing.
Yeah.
The amount of spirits that we either brought or came of their own accord back with us was also quite the sight.
Yeah, genuinely, because we went to quite like 4 countries, right? And
Mhm.
spent a lot of time getting to know each of the spirits. And we've multiple islands. We took many boat rides in many places, and ended up in Greece. Ended up in quite a number of locations, shall we say? And it was
Mhm.
really remarkable. I think I was so happy that I found that hagstone right at the Temple of Zeus, by the way. Because yeah, I strung it up on that blue cord immediately, as well as the ones in I brought back from the Acropolis. But yeah, it was remarkable, and much will be written about all of that, I'm sure, in time. But today, I want the focus to be on what that was like to see the sanctuary of Aphrodite Paphia, and as well as the beach itself. So I suppose one of the most important things to note is we're talking about an area on the southwestern coast of Cyprus. This is a sanctuary in ancient Paphos that was dedicated to Aphrodite, and it's located right next to the beach where it's said that this goddess first came to Earth, right, when she was born of the foam, which is also what the Aphro part of her name refers to, right? Also,
Mhm.
one of the reasons why one of her famous epithets is Aphrogenea, foam born, right? Or Cytheria, of Cytheria, but also referring to the redness, right, of her skin.
Mhm.
And also, of course, referring to the island of Greece, Cytheria. So one of the interesting things to note about this is that, Paphos is not just a place where she rose from the sea, this phenomenal, iconic representation, right? Venus Anadyomene, which, of her rising out of the foam, which was, of course, described in Pliny's Natural History, as well as, much beloved depictions across art, very famously by Nicholas Poussin, Sandro Botticelli, and Cornelis de Vos, right, very famously depicting this event of her coming out of the sea. And there is indeed a rock, currently known as the Petrotoromio, which is allegedly, this exact site where it occurred, and it is considered a holy place. We'll talk about that when we get to the beach portion, as it were. But right now, I think it's worth noting that for the sanctuary itself, it's said that the cult was likely of Phoenician origin. We already know that the Cypriots venerated a fertility goddess before the Greeks ever arrived to the island, and that there was a cult here with plenty of different interesting, like, iconic depictions as well. There's that famous idol of Pomos, which was first found near the village of Pomos, which dates back to the Chalcolithic period, around 30th century BC. We saw the original, on
Mhm.
display in the museum in Lefkosia. And it shows a woman with her arms spread, right? And it's supposedly a fertility symbol. You can buy pretty much in every gift shop a copy of this statue, you know,
Oh, right.
or like a bronze or copper version of it that you can wear as a necklace, or little copper or brass or bronze depictions of it, or even ones like made in faux marble and so on. Like, this is everywhere.
Mhm. You can also see it on the obverse of the €2 coin with the accession of Cyprus to the European Union. The cruciform fertility goddess being emblazoned on the currency itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And according to Pausanias, Aphrodite's worship was introduced to Paphos from Syria, and later on from Paphos it came to Cythera in Greece. And we also know that before we actually had archaeological proof of this temple specifically, we knew that there was a cult of Aphrodite that was established here since before the time of Homer, specifically because the grove and altar of Aphrodite at Paphos was mentioned in the Odyssey. But all across this area, we find female figurines and charms for fertility. The first structures were probably erected in the late Bronze Age as well. And there's actually I would say that the history of the temple is remarkable. It's an open air museum. So when you get there, it is literally this beautiful structure with tons of land for you to like walk around. There's sanctuary ruins everywhere that you could like touch and like climb onto, and there's obviously an actual building as well that houses the Bethel, which we'll talk about shortly. But it's worth noting as well that the devotion towards Aphrodite probably began with the Achaean civilization, later on adopted by the Greeks, because the Achaeans idolized a native goddess, Astarte, who was also renamed Aphrodite. And it was believed that this cult was often it was believed that this cult was influenced in the East, and so the worship of Aphrodite proper commenced on Cyprus. Homer, of course, also calls her a Cyprian and also a Paphian, referring to this area. There's a kind of legend that the first king ever to worship Aphrodite, Cinyras, built the sanctuary in honor of the goddess, and that he constructed it nearby her birthplace. And there's this myth that he himself used the shrine as a symbol of being wed to the goddess himself through sleeping with the temple prostitutes, and began this kind of incestuous practice of marrying his own daughters because his royal lineage was matrilineal and not patrilineal. And so there's this one ritual of strangers making love on the site to strengthen their bonds or to enter into bonds, or married couples doing the same, and so on, and people going on a romantic pilgrimage there. And there's also a flower festival that occurs. It's a bit tamer, as it were. But also but there's also a lot of interesting archaeological evidence about sort of like the actual cult activity. So we know, for example, that this sanctuary, Aphrodite Paphia, was the center of the worship of this goddess, not just for Cyprus alone, but for the entire Aegean world. So the descendants of this king that we just mentioned, Cinyras, who was of Phoenician origin but had a Greek name, these were the chief priests of the temple, and their authority was very great, and it was seen as essentially they were controlled also by a senate or an assembly of people. And there was also an oracle there, much as there was one in Delphi. And this is a city that's been hugely sung about and glorified by poets alike, from Aristophanes to Homer and Virgil and so on and so forth, right? The archaeology of it is also quite remarkable. Just these huge foundation walls, and even as much as crumbled over time. It's I remember like reading about it actually in The Golden Ass by Apuleius, where he mentions that Aphrodite was venerated at this wave-lapped shrine in Paphos, is the description, which I think is remarkable, because when you set foot in there, one of the first things you hear is literally the shoreline lapping against the rocks at a distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the way that the entire temple is built on kind of this cliff face that is constantly, in tension with the ocean below, and of course, the foam-born goddess herself finding a mirror not only at the start of the Roman, but at the foot of this shrine for the entire Aegean
Yeah.
is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And it's been visited by many famous emperors and survived, and outliving all of them, many dynasties and disasters and so on. The Roman Emperor Titus in 69 AD actually detoured here while he was on his way to Egypt, just to consult the oracle of the goddess who was stationed here. There was a massive earthquake around 76 to 77 AD, in which many worshippers of the Roman Empire ended up rebuilding the site. The Emperor Theodosius in the 4th century outlawed the pagan temple, which is how it began to fall into ruins in the 4th century. And as time passed, the ruins ended up being used as a building quarry for the Byzantine era, and later as a sugar mill in the Middle Ages, which destroyed the top layers of the temple. But the ancient foundation still remains. The site was revealed and preserved by the Cyprus Exploration Fund in 1887. Another archaeological dig later on came up in the 50s and again in the 96 by a Swiss-German expedition. And to this day, we still have excavation occurring. But thanks to the archaeological work being done by many of the members of these teams, we now know that worship of Aphrodite existed in Neolithic periods based on artifacts which displayed, her female figure predating Hellenistic times. We also see that she had a vast network of devotees from many cultures and civilizations, including like pretty much anyone in the Mediterranean was going over here, in order to worship her and was actively visiting this shrine. And also interestingly, when we even have found a coin of Roman origin that shows the original temple. So this is 200 AD, but the coin depicts what the temple actually looked like. And the visual image also matches the description in Homer's Iliad of the site. The physical museum itself, which is small, like when you enter the site, there's a museum that you can also like visit, which is quite small. It has some frescoes, it has some items and so on. Most famously, it has the Betel. But this also was a manor during the Ottoman Empire period. And now it has these galleries which show artifacts and preserve them from the elements. The actual name of the city, Kuklia, which is where the museum is actually named after the manor. So on that day when Key and I decided to go, we ended up waking up very early to catch the earliest intercity bus from Lefkosia to Paphos, which is about a 2-hour ride. And when we got there, we then waited a little bit and switched on to the next bus that would take us to Kuklia, exactly at a bus stop that leaves you basically in front of the museum.
Yeah. It's quite the trip, right? Going on these intercity buses and then hopping on this kind of van bus and going up kind of the bumpy roads, the temple, and everyone's just like, very overjoyed to be like, hey, here's the village, here's the temple. Good luck.
Yeah, especially because lots of people were obviously on their way as well on the same bus to go to the beach, which is obviously a major tourist attraction, as well as lots of people just going there with their families. So we get off, and keep in mind, like, the weather was perfect. It was absolutely, like, it was sunny, it was gorgeous. Like, the smell was already just hitting us from just how beautiful everything was. It was a famous perfumery that was, right next to this temple and was being produced here, as well as a copper mining facility.
Which we talked about quite a bit in the last episode with Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's there was it's pretty remarkable just the smell that you get, right? Like we were mentioning in the episode, like it really smelled like perfume everywhere. And as we step forward, there's this kind of little gate that you pass through where you get your ticket to enter the museum. And then you can walk through and just basically like wander around. We were the only people there. There was no one else really hanging out at the museum at that hour. And it was quite early in the morning. I think it was 10 a.m. or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had just, 3 hours of travel. We got there and we started to walk around. We had a bunch of fruit in our backpacks. Like literally we were loaded up on pomegranates and apples and quinces and all that good stuff, We were ready to go. And as we head in, we're looking at the sky and I'm starting to get very dizzy. Like I'm feeling a little overwhelmed spiritually, just from the buzzing. Like it just feels so active. And I'm talking to my spirits and I start to notice that these clouds are coming. But what's interesting is the weather prediction, as it were, for the day was that it was going to be completely clear and sunny, 100, percent, right? Like, and it was like that. And suddenly these beautiful, like it looked like a watercolor painting. They were absolutely gorgeous, and they were rolling off the coast, which you can actually see from the temple. You can see the southern tip of Cyprus. Just rolling up in front of us in these beautiful, like it wasn't even gray, it was like dark blue colors. Like kind of like blue green, like the sea, coming forward, and it just started raining the most beautiful, like tasty, if I can even say that, rain. Like it tasted good, it smelled fragrant, and it was heavy, but like in this joyful way. It completely like swept through the entire open air sanctuary, completely drenched us. Like we sat under this beautiful pomegranate tree, it was so lyric, and I was like, I took off my sandals and I started dancing. Like I tied up some of the storm, itself, like in knots that I had, and preserved it in like 7 knots and so on. Like we were like laughing. Like he at one point like grabbed me and like spun me around.
Mhm.
Like it was so joyous, and I kept seeing all these spirits manifest like through the waves of the rain, which were these heavy, beautiful, like just luxurious droplets that were like coating us. And I felt so refreshed. Like every piece of tension in my body from having sat on a bus for 3 hours, just vanished.
And throughout this entire storm, like the sun is still shining. Like it was really fantastic because it's like, suddenly it's just pouring rain, but it's like, still bright and still vibrant and everything is still just kind of alive.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And as we look up, as at one point, like we have this feeling, like look, we're talking to spirits. Like sometimes, like all the Key and I were traveling, we just go nonverbal, and we're like, 1 second, because we're like tuning in, we're chatting with somebody in our corner, we're chatting with somebody that came up to us, we're like speaking to, spirits of old like pilgrims and visitors, and like I was starting to hang out with this married couple that was just chatting me under an olive tree, and I could see that Key was talking to this woman who was like a priestess, like we were really in the zone, as it were.
Mhm.
And we both get the feeling that we should head into the sanctuary proper, like the manor that was built, to see the inner museum, because we knew the battle was there, and we really wanted to see the rock that is the aniconic representation of the goddess, and that is a kind of body to her. And across the traditions that I mean, really all three of us hold initiation and training in, we're no strangers to stones, right? Being
Right.
the seat of deities and being the seat of spirits and so on. So we were especially excited to see what that would look like. And as we head in, right as we're about to go under the main arch, that's when we see the clouds part. And there is, I'm kind of shuddering to even describe it, to be honest, because like I was gonna maybe write something about what that was like and read it, but I'd rather it just be completely oral.
Mhm.
I don't want anything to be scripted, it's because it's truly like, yeah, I'm laughing because it's hard to even say, but it was one of the most profound physical manifestations, I would say, that I had witnessed um, in such a holy place, because I'm no stranger to physical manifestations of spirits, or things occurring that, defy logic and explanation and so on. Like I'm I'm an animist through and through. I've seen it, I've done it. I've seen spirits do weird things, levitate and spin things around and light candles that aren't lit and so on. Like, it's happened, and many things that I really can't share out loud, not just for
Mhm.
taboos of secrecy, but also because I don't think people would believe me necessarily if I did. But this, like, I think it was one of those, like, the rain was pouring, but so were our tears, because it was her. Like, it was not a female form. It was
Mhm.
not distinctly not a human form, but we saw this light that came through, and it wasn't the sun.
Mhm.
It was specifically like up on the horizon, coming through past the sea and then arcing over space through the stars, and then coming through uh, the top of like this ray that started to shine directly on the museum and on the sanctuary, right as it passed under the arch. And the smell was intense. It was already like the perfume was already circulating through us. Like physically, I was buzzing, like I was like vibrating
Mhm.
quite strongly, and I felt completely within like a spotlight of being observed and judged and cleansed. And it clicked in me suddenly that I felt completely cleansed, of every worry, of every anxiety, of every ache. And I immediately knew I was in the presence of something holy and terrible. And terrible in the sense of like terrifying,
Mhm.
dreadful in the sense of bringing with it the genuine humility and command that necessarily comes with the grace and beauty of so primordial a being.
Like it is one of the strangest experiences of my entire life, like seeing kind of how physically manifest that like light over the horizon was, where like it's like, oh, this is like a sentient being that is, far far beyond even our wildest dreams of categorization or description. This is something else.
completely
Yeah.
illuminating and like almost bleaching out all the other spirits we were talking to, like the shades, the memories,
Mhm.
the things we were tasting and touching off the stones as we walked by them barefoot. Like
Mhm.
this was like tremendous. And it strobed towards us like a then an image of her came down and like touched the area and dispersed. Like it was literally the light came into a body and then it completely absorbed into the stones. And I was just about to like open my mouth because I was like frankly gasping with like tears, and I was about to like and I was also drenched, right? I was about
Yeah.
to turn around and say something to Key when it just so happened that the museum guard who happened to be there came out and started like laughing, you know,
Mhm.
and we were like, and I said to him in English, I turned around and I was like, oh, hello, and he just laughed at us and he said, look at what you did. You brought her, and we were looking at each other like, is this a dream? You know?
But yeah, the security guard, he's like, yeah, just pointing at us and is like, you have brought her to this place.
I,
She's back.
Yeah, well, it was so when I was like blown away that he was just saying that.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, this is her place, right? This is her temple. And he laughed and he said, yes, yes, but like, look at this. It was not supposed to happen. And he explains to us that, hernips, right? That to enter a Greek temple, you must cleanse yourself with water, right?
Mhm.
And he was saying that like she cleansed you with the rain and now she is here. You can feel it, right? And my first thought was honestly like, there's no way you can work here, without realizing that she's real, like
Yeah,
because
yeah.
she's so obviously everywhere. There's no trace of the land that is not hers, and that's interesting too because obviously there's a tourism industry around that, and like even in like the capital city in Lefkosia and also in Larnaca and Limassol, these like main cities, you can get pretty much Aphrodite merch everywhere, and every single place has something. It even says like Cyprus, the island of Aphrodite everywhere. So it's a big part of obviously of the culture and of tourism. So, there's a way in which some part of me was like, oh, maybe he, it's some kind of like secular comments about like the majesty of this natural place of beauty. But he kept like talking with us, and it was very clear that he meant it very literally.
Mhm.
And he was like, you should see her, you should come see her place, And so he ushered us over to the area of the museum, which is quite small, right? Where you could see the Betel, and basically told us he'd give us some privacy. To like worship,
Mhm.
we were the only ones there, and he even made a joke later on when we actually came back out, where he was saying that on the security camera, it was just us coming through, and he was like, as soon as you came through the gates, that's when the rain started. And he kept saying, oh, she washed you away, she bathed you, she perfumed you, and then she came down, she touched down for you. And like God's blessed this guy, God and every God bless this man, because I think without him there, we would have just been like looking at each other like, what is happening, but like he kind of
Mhm.
anchored us a little bit, but kept reinforcing the majesty of what was happening. So we immediately went there first. Like there are other rooms you can explore in the museum in the manor, and there's actually a section to the side where there's like a video that's playing with English subtitles in Greek that explains like aspects of the history of the museum site. But we first went to the Betel. This is her zone one. This is her rock. Which for the patron subscribers, we're gonna have pictures that I took with Key in the show notes. We'll also put some up in a Discord, and I'll include some in my Instagram at Dragon Cunning. But that was remarkable. I was trembling as soon as we got to the stone, and
Mhm.
we just felt her imbue everything. First of all, it was glowing.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
It's a fantastic start when it's like, oh, that rock is the only source of light in this room. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
During 10 a.m. broad daylight.
Mhm.
Um, so the stone, which served as her, cultic idol, um, was there. And we were like trembling to say the least, right?
Mhm. We
Like
were we were literally shook.
yeah, we came up and we were like bowing, prostrating ourselves, praying. The actual museum board says that the stone is black green volcanic stone, and it was the cult symbol of Aphrodite at the sanctuary of Paphos. Similar conical objects appear in known depictions of the Hellenistic and Roman sanctuary, ancient writers describe it as aniconic, without a figural representation, without a human form, or without an animal form. And it's the center of this cult of this deity. It actually says probably a remnant of ancient practices in the Orient, where the worship of sacred stones believed to embody the deity is known.
Mhm.
And immediately we can't. This is the one part of the story, one of the, I suppose, many parts of the story. Unfortunately, we can't really talk about out loud in terms of what the communication occurred, what we heard, what the voice was saying to us. We did meet an intermediary spirit who was a priestess that spoke to us, who was one of the oracles. But the adventure ended with Key and I running over outside to cup our hands to get as much of the rain as possible, to flick it upon the shrine, to fully prostrate ourselves like completely on the ground, chest to the floor, bowing, and to commune with both the goddess and the entourage of different oracles that came forward.
Yeah, it was kind of one of the most remarkable spiritual experiences, just in terms of like how locked in we were, for lack of a better term, where it was like there was no question of the, how physical the spirits around us were. It was like we were in that temple when these practices were happening. The goddess was there on the shrine. Like all of these, priestesses of the temple were just in front of us talking to us, as if, we were just standing in the same room. And
Yeah.
it was such a, like trippy, genuinely like surreal experience of just be, and, like the vibe of it all was just um overwhelmed, I suppose. Like it's hard to call it anything other than overwhelming, because it's like, everything is just coated in this serenity and this peace and this totality of the experience of like, this is what is happening, live in this moment, and participate within it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Salt, I don't know if you remember, but like one of the first things I said to you once I got my internet back, was like quite literally just like, I think we met her.
Yeah, I remember you telling me like, and I was really excited, but at the time, I think it was quite difficult to, right after that kind of experience, that you want to decompress and everything. So I was just waiting, like bouncing around with excitement, waiting for you to tell me. And when you finally did, like, I was not prepared. Like, I knew it was going to be big because of the way you described it beforehand. But when you, I guess, when you were, when you told me like the details and everything, like the intensity of the experience, the beauty of the experience, like just how incredible that moment was. Like, I don't know, it's one of those things that you hope to be blessed for as a devotee, right? Like this is kind of the beatific vision, right? It's what you seek in your
Mm-hmm.
devotion to God. So I think this kind of experience is like you said, it's indescribable in terms of its scope, its beauty, its impact on you, like, and that's why it's such a joy to hear you guys talk about it. You know what I mean? Like to get that kind of direct encounter with deity is a privilege, and it's a honor that we all seek for, and it's something that we should all celebrate in that way. And I just love hearing about it.
Yeah, thank you. Like having, been in front of many different shrines to deities, including enshrined deities, right? Like for example, in the various Afro-traditional religions, as well as different kinds of, even in front of the trees, like the zapis that are consecrated to different saints, in the Balkans, for example. Being within the presence of spirits like that is something that's obviously going to be very intense and holy, but in this way, it just felt like it wasn't just the shrine, it wasn't even just the
Mhm.
temple. It was the location, right? It was that this was the land itself, had this connection that went so deep. Like every time I took a step, I could just feel the bones of ancestors that had walked along this path to be with her. And, there were these beautiful pomegranate trees everywhere, as well as olive trees and even like apple trees and so on, that I'm so glad I took pictures of them, because I even have pictures of the clouds receding, because that was the thing when we finished, when we made a certain oath and we made a certain pact, and we, when the gods show up and say certain things, you don't necessarily refuse, right? You say yes, ma'am,
Mhm.
and I took a picture of us, right at the edge of the shrine, looking down at this Orthodox cemetery underneath, and the sea that obviously faces the south of the island. And you could just see the blue clouds, the same color as the blue sea, just parting and coming out. And as we exited the little area with the betel, where we had made our, agreements, as it were, and came out among all these like pomegranate trees and lime trees and everything like that, we our museum guide came back and started laughing with us, and he was like, see, and then he like pointed, and I took a picture actually of this moment where the clouds parted like a donut, like literally like a halo of light um was crowning. And I'm so glad I took a picture of it too, because it's it's quite the phenomenon, right, to see like a literal circle appear in the sky over the sanctuary, begin to stretch the clouds from within, extending outwards. And he was pointing at the clouds, and and each picture I took, you can just see the clouds parting more and more. And it just says, and he was like, you see, it's happening. Like, it's like you were meant to come here. And we didn't indicate like why we were here, or to tourism, I suppose. We didn't really like discuss anything with the person. And he just let us like hang out. Like, we walked around, we picked up all this like really beautiful stuff. We got dirt from like serpent holes and around the property. The Church of St. Nicholas, which was a small church that was actually built in the 16th century AD and was destroyed in the 18th century, on the site as well. We found the area where there's this millstone next to where the mother of Helen of Troy's house was supposedly there, laid that, everything like that. There was just so much, and we talked to a lot of different spirits. We hung out, gathered all kinds of things, sherds, like
Mhm.
I completely with the guard's blessing too, which was interesting, because I didn't want to like piss him off that I was like collecting like pebbles and things, you know what I mean? But like obviously it's a UNESCO protected heritage site. But he was
Mhm.
like completely vibing with us, and he was like, yes, yes, like kiss the dirt. It was great. And in the end, like we were just hugging and crying,
Mhm.
And then it like dawned on me. I was like, hey, we still gotta go see the beach. Like we still gotta go see where she was born.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, that guard was the MVP because we went into like the museum at one point and he's like, "Oh, blah blah blah," talking to us about the shrine, and we're like, "Oh yeah, this historical thing," and he's like, "No, I know you guys worship this deity, so like go do your thing."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were
First.
trying to be all like chill, like we're just normal tourists, But then in the end, we actually went to the underpass, like this little crypt area, and we
Mhm.
just like belted out some prayers from the PGM, from the Orphic hymn, the Homeric hymn, the Sappho's hymn.
Yeah.
We were like we were absolutely vibrating, vowels and names of power and epithets and stuff like that, and watching as the weather changed with it.
So I just want to give some input here because I've worked security before. The fact that the guard was just like completely okay with it is not what a guard should be doing, and that's just kind of a credit to this entire experience to me. Like the fact that this man just was like, "Hey guys, feel free to vibe and worship." Like that's crazy. I love that. Like
You say
seriously,
that, but like I just feel like, if you work security at one of the holiest, like, polytheistic sites, you know, in the Mediterranean, you would probably be like, I've seen some shit, I know she's real.
that's damn true. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's a site you want to fight for.
Mhm.
They say in house is a good job for the industry, but that's a good post.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So we managed to get out, weeping, clinging onto each
Mhm.
other. Not the first time, certainly not the last time that Key would have to physically, carry me or hold me, as I was like trembling in trance, almost unable to breathe. And we managed to sit down at this beautiful little cafe in Kukulia. And so I was like, let's just take a taxi because the cafe is right next to the taxi service kind of area, which was closed even though it says open 24, So
Yeah.
we called them.
We
And a
called
guy
him
came from the taxi office.
it was so funny. He's like, "Oh, hello, where are you?" And we're like, we're in your office." He's like, "Oh shit, all right, on my way."
He was obviously also having coffee because he
Yeah.
came in like 2 minutes, and then drove us to the beach. So we finally get there, and let's just say, as soon as you're dropped off, right, like in this parking area where families are coming in, there's like a little kiosk like store where you can buy swimsuits and goggles and souvenirs and sandwiches and smoothies. It's kind of like a one-stop area with like showers outside and stuff like that for people who are going swimming.
Mhm.
Like you just peer over the rail by the hiking trail that goes into like the Aphrodite hiking area. And you see that green, blue, beautiful, cerulean sea and the richness of the sky. And we just like couldn't stop hugging each other. We were like,
Yeah.
going crazy. And I said to Key, okay, we're just gonna go to the beach. Like, I don't want to do the hiking trail. I don't want to like waste any time. Like, it is now like almost noon. I want to go and just go on the beach. Like and we saw the rock. So there's a specific rock. It's not the one that's on the coast. It's a little bit off of it, like a short swim away. And it said that when the foam hits that rock and the sunlight hits it from a different angle and they kind of come together, it does look like a woman, like a female figure coming out of the sea. Having seen this in person, I can say 100%. Like it is one of the most gorgeous like sights.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like it just seeing like the sea foam gather and the way that it just like it's very much like those beautiful paintings, like of her coming out of the oyster.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that particular iconography makes perfect sense to both of us now, having seen it in person, because it's like it is uncanny how much it looks like just a woman cloaked in like a robe standing with the sun behind her above the waves. It actually looks.
Hmm. Yeah, just coming out of that seashell, right? Like absolutely phenomenal. So we head down the trail. And I was wearing like sandals, but Key had on like shoes. So he was
Mhm.
kind of helping me navigate down. And as we get there, we say our prayers and basically like many different traditions, of what you do when you greet beach spirits, the spirits of the threshold, we greet her, we make our prayers. We come in, there's families everywhere. Kids are having fun, like couples are like kissing and stuff like that. People are like literally praying and like sprinkling themselves. There's these beautiful bushes with all these tied prayers everywhere.
Mhm.
It's so beautiful, just people like leaving behind like little like love charms everywhere. It was such like a truly magical place.
Yeah, like there was this one kind of like shrub in particular that I'll never forget that is kind of the final point of the pilgrimage for a lot of people, where it's like literally thousands, like tens of thousands almost, of these cloth strips tied onto the shrub to be like, I was here, here's my offering, here are the, here's the beauty that I'm giving to the goddess herself.
Hmm.
Yeah, so all right, so knowing you guys, you've investigated every single little thing about the island as far as like folklore and stuff. And one of the nicest things about like island beliefs and everything is just how insular it is. Like every hill is documented, every stone has its spirit, and each shore is haunted, right? So like I want to kind of hear some of the stuff that you guys dug up during those investigations.
I mean, obviously we're no experts on Cyprus or Cypriot folklore at all, actually. I would say not at all. We were only there for, about a week and a half. So, but we did get plenty of time to talk to locals, and we did spend a lot of time actually investigating things around these sites. And one of the things that came up actually was that the main folklore suggests that actually Aphrodite didn't just rise off the waves of that coast, right? Alone. Like she came with many, many nymphs, sometimes referred to as like, sea fairies, sometimes referred to as, specifically just like, priestesses or daughters or even, but mostly nymphs that guided her to the shore. So the stone is not, like I said, very far from the shoreline. You can swim to it quite easily, but there is a bit of a gap And so it was said that, as she came out of the foam, these nymphs and fairies kind of guided her towards the stone. And we saw that procession lapping against the shoreline with the sea, like just regularly. It was actually quite remarkable just to see them dancing and flittering, and the tips of their toes not quite touching the sea, but floating off of it. And immediately we were drawn to make an offering. To be like, it's one of those things where like spirits know that you see them and they know that you see them, and they know that you know. And so we wanted to make our announcement and everything like that. And so we started pacing. And one of the first things that you probably know about us if you listen to the podcast long enough, especially episode 6, is that we're always, our eyes are on the ground looking for holes, we're looking for hagstones. And so obviously, like, we were kind of like, I wonder, it's a pebble beach, and absolutely zero. We were off another island actually in Dalmatia earlier, like just about like a week before. And we had found like 100, easily.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to the point that we were starting to throw, some were like, oh, this one's not so good. We should get a different one because this one is much better.
Mhm.
Like we felt like this one has a bigger hole,
Yeah, there were so many that we were actually leaving a substantial amount of them behind. Or like, that's a pinprick. Yeah, this one has 3 holes, but like one of them's kind of weird. So I'll just get this other better 3-holed one over here.
Literally, like, oh, this 7-hold one I can use in a vessel because I don't need it to look very like large, but this 7-hold one could go on a charm, Like
Yeah.
we were so spoiled in Dalmatia for all the numbers of hagstones. There's a reason why my mentors, when they tell me like, oh, get this number of holes, get these things, get 7 of these, get 20 of these, and so on. They tell me like, oh, go to these areas, go to the coast here in Dalmatia, like you'll find them. And so we
Mhm.
had like many there. And here, just massive Pebble Beach, and there were none. And my first thought was like, I mean, utter wizards have been here. I was like, there's no way. So, whenever you and I are in Brighton, and then we're like, oh, there's still so many, even though I thought we picked it clean like several times. And same with like 7 of our friends, who go here regularly. Not to mention all the other occultists in the UK.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a hotspot for it. But it sounds almost like a supermarket when you've got all these like the vegetables, and you're like, oh, this vegetable's not as nice. This one's a bit too squishy. Like you're just getting perfectionist because you can. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. But here there were none, absolutely none. We were just walking around and we're like, this is interesting. But then I was like, you know what, let's not worry about it. That's not necessarily what we're here for. And I told Key, like, I want to drop our offerings off, like the
Mhm.
fruit that like this bounty that we brought. And including some of the pomegranates that we had picked, at the temple and everything like that. So we go underneath this beautiful giant, stone that everyone was bouldering on. People were climbing it, they were taking selfies at the top, like tourists and locals alike were like swimming and hanging out, like couples were kissing, like it was obviously people were touching it, and so people trying to swim to the actual Pedro Toromio, which the reason it's called that, by the way, the Rock of the Roman, is because there's this legendary hero of the Eastern Roman Empire from the 9th century called Digenes Acritas, who was half Syrian, half Roman. And his name, Digenes, means actually double born, right, of 2 natures. And it's said that he threw a huge stone in the direction of the Saracens to prevent them from invading the island. And so that's why it came to be called the Petrodramium. But this is the Rock of Aphrodite itself. And so we ended up going towards it. Legend says that she emerged fully grown from the waves and was blown to the winds to the shores of Paphos by these nymphs. And now it's said to be a symbol of love and fertility, right? Key and I heard
Mhm.
many times people saying if you swim around it 3 times, you'll be granted a new lover. But if you're already in a relationship, you'll be blessed with eternal love in your marriage. So one of the things that, of course, there's lots of locals were eager to swim around it, right? Because of this notion that you'd be granted love, or you'd be blessed with pregnancy, or eternal love in your marriage if you were in a relationship, or like eternal friendship if you make the pilgrimage with your friend, So of course we wanted to do it, right? And we absolutely were excited to do it because we wanted to harvest also little pebbles that were touching the stone as materia and so on, and just kind of make our, complete our pilgrimage. Before we swam, I wanted to leave the offerings. And so one of the main things that we did, knowing that there are many sacred sites and sanctuaries dedicated to Aphrodite in this area, including those like Roman sites, shrines to her as Venus, votive sites to her as Hathor Isis, as Ishtar, as Astarte. Not to like get too syncretic, because obviously these are all also individual cults, right? But like there were intentionally syncretic ones here, right? Seeing them as like collectives, right? And
Mhm.
so we were like, well, we wanted to kind of make an offering to all of the goddesses that were called here, all of the different, even pre-Aphroditean fertility beings that were worshipped on this island and worshipped here in this space. So we left our offerings by the stone and we chanted and we prayed and so on and so forth, right? And right as we finish, I'm turning around because I'm thinking, okay, let's go around the other way. It'll be easier to swim there.
Mhm.
And as I walk around, like in front of me, it's hard to even describe because it's so like it was so kind of unbelievable to me in a moment. A woman is in front of me, right? And she's physical. Like I thought that she was just another like person there at the beach because it was quite popular. There was a lot of people around us.
Mhm.
Um, and she was like exhilaratingly beautiful. She was a little taller than me. She was wearing this gorgeous like a red dress. Like it was like a very bright carnelian red. But it looked kind of like a very much like what something that you'd see in a depiction of the goddess, sort of depiction of one of her oracles, right? Like it just kind of had that style with the way it
Mhm.
was draped over her. And she had like dark brown, very curly hair and just absolutely piercing eyes. And I was in front of her, so like Kia, I think, you were kind of off to the side, so you saw her, but you didn't necessarily like you weren't like really like close. Like you were just still by the fruit that we left.
Yeah, like she had walked up to you and like kind of tapped you on the shoulder.
Yeah, so she tapped me and I look at her, and my breath got caught in my throat because I didn't feel if you've ever been around situations where spirits are possessing somebody, you know what I'm referring to. Like it's that feeling like that your hair raises in the back of your neck and you're like, oh, something is in this person. So that even if this could be a physical manifestation, this could be a human person who's mounted at the moment, but something is different about this person.
Mhm.
And she takes my hand, extends it outwards, and then presses into my palm a stone the same color as her dress. There's pebbles of every color everywhere. And so that, like honestly, there's like so many of them, and they were all beautiful and smooth and so on. And she presses into my hand this stone that's like quite small. In hindsight, I actually thought about it, and like the stone is basically the shape, like as a miniature of the coast itself
Mhm. Mhm.
of like the area. If you look at like Kukli in general, like what it looks like to go from the sanctuary to the beach, like that is basically the kind of shape of the stone. If you like search like what Kukli looks like as a territory. And she like smiles as I thank her, and she just kind of looks at me knowingly. And suddenly she just turns around and like leaves after smiling like briefly, like a very brief smile. But like her eyes didn't really look into me. They almost like looked through me. And I try and tell her in Greek, thank you, several times. It's first in English and then in Greek. And she doesn't flinch, she doesn't turn around. She just keeps walking away. And I notice she's barefoot. And she curves around a stone, like the one that we're like next to where we're putting all our offerings, and on the coast. And then I try and go around, um, and she's gone. Like not just like in the crowd. Like it wasn't such a crowd that I would have lost her like that instantly. Like she was just genuinely gone.
Mhm. And like I even kind of like scrambled up the stone to look for her because I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, yeah,
And
Key
she
was
was just
actually
gone.
climbing. Yeah, yeah, to try and find her.
Like she had straight up vanished. And though it was so surreal because she did not speak a single word the whole time, but the expression she made when she like handed you that rock was as if she had like, given an entire treatise on like the worship of Aphrodite.
Yeah, genuinely. Like I was so blown away and I just kind of like laughed.
Mhm.
Like we couldn't, and we had just drawn puntos to certain like the playa, like beach spirits, and everything. Like I don't know if we're the first people to do that necessarily. Maybe I hope some other Brazilians have done that before us. But
Mhm.
and we had sang to like the Pombagiras da Praia and so on. And it was great. But like that just blew my mind. And so of course we took our shoes off. We tied keys, laces, to his backpack to just kind of
Mhm.
hang them there, put mine away, and we went to the rock, and we swam around 3 times and collected our pebbles that were touching it. So if you heard in the episode, the last one, 29 with Austin, where we spoke about giving different stones from this particular place to different friends, this is what we collected. It was for friendship, and it was specifically stones that we gathered that had touched this place, and that touched
Mhm.
the place where she was born. And so Salt, like the one that I picked up for you, I literally like thought of you when I picked it up. Like same with other friends, like I specifically like named it for each person that I collected. And I had some extras, of course, as well that went into some of the material we made.
Honestly, it's beautiful. Like just everything you've described here, like the depth of the love involved, the divine blessings and fortune that you've received from the goddess. Like, yeah, it's such a wonderful experience.
And we kept finding these like like literally like shaped like shoes, like stones everywhere. They look like slippers, and one of the locals even said that they're like the slippers of the nymphs that carried her here, that allowed them
Mhm.
to walk on the water. And it was only after we left the offerings, made the pilgrimage, like secured it on the stone, came back to the shore, that we found exactly 7 hagstones. Venus's
Mhm.
number, exactly 7, and of descending size, so they could form a perfect cairn. And that's when Key and I immediately, like, we didn't even like this whole time we were barely speaking to each other, to be honest. Like at the temple, especially when we were doing the worship of the goddess, like we barely spoke to each other. We were like fully telepathic at that point, like just like back and forth chatting about what we were gonna do. But like we knew in that moment, like these were our an iconic representations of Aphrodite. Like nothing, like we didn't want to buy a statue. Okay, for those of you who have ever been on Etsy or Amazon, and we're like, or eBay, and we're like, Greek deity statue shopping, and they're all expensive, and they're very like, it's a lot of money to ship them if you live in like North America, for example. They are all super cheap in Greece, in Cyprus, and all the tourist shops have them. They have every deity you can imagine. We were like, oh, we could buy so many, and we chose, you know what? No, we both got idols of Pomos because that was really like iconic. Like it had to be done. But we decided no, no statues of Aphrodite. These 7 stones stacked on top of each other, that's our idol.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And these stones are literally perfect for it because they're flat. Like they are completely flat on two sides, otherwise almost perfectly circular, and they have one hole going through each where you can like pour things through, do all the offerings, do everything. It seems like, I say it seems like as if we didn't just have a theophany, but it's perfect for the purpose.
Also, I think it's really, I mean, having been the hagstone hunters that we are, it's really rare to find ones that like stack like that top of each other with the holes being perfectly aligned. So you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
actually
yeah.
pour water from it. And we did get water. We got everything we needed. But like, so remember when I took them out for you and I was like, okay, be very careful. These are like very holy. And like I didn't even explain what they were. Like you knew that there was these 7 hagstones we collected because we told you over the phone. But like you remember when you actually saw them for the first time?
Yeah, I did. Like they had an atmosphere to them, shall we say? Like it's one of those things, right? Like the presence of divinity, the enlivened feeling, like the sense of awe, I suppose would be the most apt description as well, that kind of accompanied them was, oof.
They are beyond holy, and the nice thing about them is we were kind of given them having to walk to the far extremity of this pebble beach and finding kind of the stone wall, turning back, and then on the way back we find each of the 7 and kind of in sequence, in descending order, and being like, oh, this is perfect. One of the funny things as well is when we were on this beach, luckily enough, in addition to all these stones, I was able to put a little bit of the treasure hunting stuff to work, and trying to find these hagstones, which of course were only given as gifts by the goddess herself, but managed to find the stone on the ground that was like a black slate containing these like gold flakes going through it.
Which you ended up giving to my main spirit as a gift to him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just was like, oh, cool. Here's some gold.
No, absolutely. You know, people say they do treasure hunting magic, but Key will actually go find like real gold and raw quartz and a bunch of other things and like pretty expensive stuff in the ground using his juju. So all good on you. But yeah, it was also Salt Baby, I want you to know that like I was thinking of you with like your eyes lens flaring when we found the hagstones in descending order of size because I was like, oh, I took a picture of like the big one too, you know. I was like, oh, this is so Corpus Hermetica. Like this is so, you know, spirit into matter.
Oh, those
Just
concentric spheres,
I
baby.
know, literally, I was like this, and also having been a Tuba Veneris girl for the past several years, I was like, oh, I'm so ready to see all the planets as kind of Venus, you know? Like, I'm so ready to see all of them through that lens of like the light of them coming through the seven faces of Aphrodite around you.
Oh wow, yeah. Like there's so much here, like the symbolism just of the, like you said, like the various sizes and even the like uniformity of everything. Yeah, wow. It kind of leaves you speechless in the best of ways.
We were completely blown away. Yeah, we barely, like, you know, that out of the three of us, like, all of us are really quiet people unless we're around each other. Like, I would say Salt, you're probably the quietest in general.
Yeah, I'm either silent or talking for 20 minutes.
Yeah. And then I'm the quietest if I'm not around you guys, but like very talkative around you. And then Key's kind of in the middle. Like he's always like half and half. But like both Key and I were pretty much nonverbal for the hike. We
Yeah.
were just like crying, hugging, like eventually my feet hurt, so Key carried me up the rocks again. And when we
Mhm.
finished doing everything, we ate like the best sandwiches of our lives in that little kiosk.
Yeah, dude, that kiosk across the street, fantastic KO beers on tap. Shout outs to Bubba Carla.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, whom we met in Lefkosia. Absolutely wonderful human being. She's 90 years old and had Key and I hang out with her for 2 hours while she fed us a steady diet of KO beers and made Key smoke 7 cigarettes. It was lovely. We talked about politics, about love, about children, about geography, about travel. We became best friends for those 2 hours. I hope to see her
Mhm.
again.
I really do as well, yeah. Fantastic human being. Shout outs to Bubba Carla.
Got
And
Key hooked on the KO.
got me hooked on the KO, hooked us up with, dozens of icons. But speaking of perfection, shout outs to our friends, Thrice Returner and Lady.
The name, they were two cats. We asked spirits what their names are, and one of the spirits referred to one of the cats as like he who had descended 3 times and returned 3 times. So his name is Thrice Returner. And when I asked this other spirit, like, what's that cat's name? She just said Lady. So Thrice Returner and Lady are these two cats that we hung out with for a while waiting for the bus to take us back to Paphos.
Oh man, yeah.
And like cried, you know, the whole time back. Like just couldn't handle it. We were like, we're gonna be like we already were like, okay, we love each other, but like and our best friends forever. Like that meme of like I cast eternal friendship, like and the
Yeah.
two wizards hugging, you know, like that's exactly the vibe. And then we were like, okay. And as soon as we go back to the Airbnb, having had dinner in Lefkosia again, we were like, you know, we basically left at 6 a.m. We got back around 9 p.m. And we were like, okay, one of the things we agreed upon was we would share this experience. So that's what we want to talk about. We want to introduce the Bounty of Neferieri, which is our collection that Key and I are putting out together. A huge thank you to Salt for your advice, your help, your election. There was a Venus rising in Pisces election that you helped find that ended up going into some of the powders as well.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, like, and for being our confidant, really, you know, not just as my, you know, romantic partner, but also as a best friend to Key as well, right? Like you were a huge help in organizing our thoughts, thinking about the purity, about the standards for everything like that. and helping us create this way of sharing in our love for this goddess and for experience at this site with the world. So this beautiful experience that we had, and keep in mind, we had to censor 70% of it in terms of just the raw, what was happening with spirits that are in our courts and not in our courts, spirits that came back with us, spirits that wanted to remain there, that we spoke to and that we really cultivated relationships with. So there was a lot more going on. This is the abridged version for public consumption, as it were. Some folks in the Discord server, if you're lucky and you get us in a mood, you might hear us blab more about it on voice calls in the future when we're just hanging out with you guys and Key is, raging at Elden Ring. But there's a lot that went into it, and this is just what we can say publicly. And we already had like an idea. Like later on, we went to Serbia, went to Greece. So like, he and I already kind of planned out a whole Google Doc what we're gonna do, and then we spent a half a year making it perfect. And Key this time around, as the alchemy king himself, made all of the kind of products that are the oil, the incense, the tincture, the balm, which I'll let him talk about for a little bit, and I was in charge of the amulets. So hold with us for a little bit because we're going to talk a little how those stones and the hagstones we collected elsewhere, as well as the 7 hagstones that are our iconic representation, our Bethel, if you will, came into play. But for now, let's start by saying that the first thing that really began everything, when we figured out what everything was going to be, was and knew what we wanted to bring to the table, right? Like what each offering we would give was meant to provide for people who would want to share in this and buy it, and how different ones would help with love, with sex, with friendship with spirits, with making yourself more likable to spirits, with luck, with fortune, all these things, right? Including familiars. What I was responsible for a set of ensouled fetishes that are actually take the form of hagstone prayer ropes, that I'll talk about a little bit later. What we began was significant offerings to the goddess back home. Key and I developing a weekly practice with her that we honor every Friday. That actually hinges very much on our actual friendship as well, our bond, having done this pilgrimage together, which is why I really, 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 I'm putting it out there. The intention is there. The 3 of us will go back together. Because Salt couldn't come because of work and other things. But like next time you are coming with us because I need you to experience this place as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that is definitely on the cards.
But the first thing after we set up the practice and got comfortable, we needed to spend some time in prayer, was that stone that woman gave me.
Yeah.
That and as well as all the hagstones that I selected from our trip that we gathered in other locations that were all washed, because we obviously brought them in our suitcase everywhere. They were all washed in those waters. They were fed white doves. The doves themselves were reduced to a powder, and they were all reduced to a powder. So not only were the stones fed, the offering of choice for Aphrodite being white doves, but they were also given, the powder itself was incorporated into many of the things that Kia ended up using them for. So I'll let you start maybe with the first oil, which is the oil of Aphrodite herself. We're calling it the oil of Nefertiti. Nefer, of course, is the beautiful beauty in Kemetic, in ancient Egyptian language. But for example, Queen Nefertiti, right, is the beauty has come, is what her name means. But it's also one of Aphrodite's secret names from the PGM, right? There's quite a few mentions of this being one of her most significant names. And so the oil of the Nefertiti, we wanted to, at minimum have a standard oil that anyone could use to cultivate a relationship with not just the qualities of Venus and of Aphrodite, but of a relationship with her.
Yeah. This oil is kind of the centerpiece, I suppose, of my half of the launch and the entire collection, because one of the manners in which I like to work my alchemy and like to make my oils is that, for any particular deity under which I'm making substances that are under their patronage, I'm like, okay, this is meant to be a liquid version of you functionally. So, for those familiar, my gold oil in the Expedite collection is very much so an analog to this. But the oil of Nefariary is really structured around the historically attested offerings to Aphrodite, throughout the various papyri and accounts of chroniclers in the ancient and slightly more modern Aegean world. And it also draws inspiration from Agrippa's three books, namely Book One, Chapter 28, What Things Are Under the Power of Venus. Of course, sharing a lot of lore and overlap with those earlier chroniclers. But of course, this oil is constructed out of, apples, pomegranates, both of which were either salvaged from the site directly and reduced to powder, or offered to the deity and, reduced in various ways, either desiccated or infused hot into different oils, or infused cold into different oils, depending on, what process was dictated by the spirits involved. Roses of various parts and kinds offered unto the deity and to the spirits that we met along the trip when in there. Myrtle, of course, being one of the main floral offerings attested throughout the ancient world for the goddess, all carried in, blessed olive oils, blessed almond oils, and then, of course, having the influence of the doves that were fed to the goddess. The vessel of this oil itself is kind of just as important as being a sort of flask or crucible or womb, if you will, for its incubation upon the shrine that has been set up to Aphrodite. Um, it's clad in a bunch of red cloth that has been extensively blessed, adorned with charms from the PGM and other ancient sources, has stones collected from her sanctuary wrapped up into it or otherwise affixed by sewing or knots. And this is sort of a play on the double named pun where we have kitare or kitaria, depending, both meaning the red one, a name attested in PGM 4 2891 to 2942, which we'll talk about later, as well as being one of the main names for Astarte, of course, the cognate of Aphrodite, and also kind of a pun on Cytherea, the purported birthplace of Aphrodite Urania, to also have that essence captured within the oil. But this is really the main flagship on my end of things, where, all of the offerings that were made to facilitate the birth of the other oils and other balms and tinctures and all that, parts of that went to this oil. All of the prayers that went to the deity in the Friday practice that Svinga mentioned were again mirrored into this bottle to maintain kind of that inertia. And all sorts of um, votive acts done before and involving its container and its components to really ensure the essence of our love for this deity, and the pact is what brings her and her emissaries forward within it.
I love that we were able to actually take some of like the pomegranates and apples and limes, that were taken from a temple and actually powder them down and dry them out.
Mhm. Yeah, one of my favorite parts is like how locally sourced a lot of the materials are,
Hmm.
because what is the soil from which they were grown other than that which has received continual offerings in various guises and methods and forms for millennia.
Yeah. And I think that's one that I think it's just gorgeous that we were able to do. And Salt and I especially talk a lot about like what it means to have piety towards deities, and I think pilgrimage is a huge part of it, right? That like I think, I mean, I'm obviously Christian, but I'm also plus 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 plus. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like we have the um function of animism in which all of these things combine together. And so I think about, pilgrimage to monasteries and to saint relics, but also pilgrimage to other deities too, right?
Mhm.
And so there's something about the idea of like there's many Aphrodite oils out there, but there's something about the way that everything is so locally sourced from her most sacred temple that makes me, frankly, a little smug about the way that you made this.
Yeah.
Perhaps rightly so.
Yeah, I am, without dwelling in the land of hubris, I'm very proud of this oil.
As
um,
as you should be.
yeah, I think, there are plenty of Aphrodite oils out there that will get the job done, will get you into communion, but the lengths to which we've gone to salvage all these things, I think really help to set it apart and, really ultimately just show the depth of our piety, the depth of our devotion, the um, depth of our practice with this deity.
Absolutely. And then it's not the only oil. That is the flagship one. That is the one to her,
Mhm.
very much like the gold one. And then you made a trinity, which you're very fond of doing.
Yeah.
But you
Oh
made
man.
three different items in honor of, three famous forms of love, Eros, Agape, and Philia.
Mhm.
And I love, you had already talked to me about like, oh, you wanted to do these three kinds of love, but Salt, you might find it interesting how it was like he kind of decided on what would be what. Like, which would be, for example, he wanted to do a tincture and he wanted to do a balm and he wants to do another oil, right? And I had my idea of like which could be which, but I think it was the way that it kind of played out, I think is quite brilliant. So I'll let you guys talk about it.
Yeah, do tell, do tell.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose we should start with the Eros bomb, right? And of course, it includes its own oil, balms being a construction of in this case beeswax and another herbally and other materia infused oil. But it of course contains the aforementioned oil of Nefariary. As was said earlier, the goal of it was for that oil to be liquid Aphrodite, so I put some of that in there. But the reason why I wanted the Eros one to be a balm is because
Oh no!
oh man.
This is to heal people from what
Yeah.
your dom top bullshit does to them.
I wanted to put my own expression of Eros into it. What else should I? Oh
I
fuck.
like gonna like spray you down with like water.
Yeah, it's that the wolf being sprayed by a fire hose meme.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, but yeah, this balm, the oil that is made to constitute it, of course contains the main oil was the carrier and was fed equally with a little bit of the remains of the birds. Contained also within it are the petals and importantly the thorns of roses that were offered to the deity because I wanted it to encapsulate not only the sweetness and intoxication of Eros, but also the kind of sharper and darker parts that can come along with it. So the thorns definitely went in there. Things like lavender, red clover, demiana, kava root, and ashwagandha also went in there, all blessed in particular ways to create kind of a dreamlike opium-like haze for the wearers of this thing to really kind of get into that state that comes along with Eros, that sort of intoxication, not necessarily on substances or on herbal, allies or actions themselves, but on really the commingling and participation in the spirit of the person whom you are experiencing this kind of love with.
And I guess it's worth noting as well for the when you mentioned like the dove, like this was fully baked first before it was powdered, like it is safe,
Yeah, that should be really heavily emphasized. Like this stuff is sterilized. Um, I
Unlike the
to
freak sex you'll be having with it. No, sorry.
I'm gonna come.
But yeah, there are a variety of applications that shook out of this bomb. I put a few things in there that are also to make partners who, for those involved in the trade who are relying on all manner of other folklorically or practically informed approaches to get someone to mellow the fuck out who has maybe made them their client, I suppose, for the night to make them docile and submissive in that way.
That's great that it also works for sex workers as well if they need like the clients to be, fast with their money, like loose with it, but also quickly exiting their lives and being docile and submissive otherwise.
hmm Yeah, because I wanted to really maximize the, what is the limits of the meaning of the erotic in this sense, like what is literally participating in the form of eros, and that is in there. So
Mm-hmm.
getting people in and out of the door as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the whole thing, I used a bunch of different herbs to dye it red. And so when it gets mixed in with the wax, it has this nice pink to it. um,
That's
that
beautiful.
is, mhm.
And it's
And
healing.
yeah, there's enough in there that it can ignite the kind of the sensation of the flesh and the sensory capacity of the skin and the body, but there's enough that I've put it on cuts and bruises that I've picked up in the course of just doing random farm work and things like that, and on top of having a wonderful evening afterwards, it does help to kind of clean up the remains of the act, shall we say?
Watch out, farm boys. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I also love that it can be used with spirits too. And spirit sexual congress with spirits, spirit lovers, it is an excellent one to activate the ability to perceive and to feel that sensory touch.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this oil, in terms of the bottle itself also being shrouded, not so much to call upon the nature of the color of the flesh of the deity, but the substance of the flesh. To
Hmm.
say, instead of being the red one by appearance, what does it mean to be the red one by sensation? Where it's exploring what does it mean to be red skinned in terms of the blush at the partner, the flushed skin in the heat of the moment, the fire across the flesh at the touch of the lover,
Hmm.
be it a spirit or a person, and getting that enchantment also to be reflected therein by its nature of a balm. You are literally applying redness to the flesh. You are participating in the kitaria, the red bodied one, by applying it. So there's
Hmm.
also the extent of what does it mean to apply pigment? What does it mean to apply dye? What does it mean to apply even makeup in some capacity to the body to adorn oneself in this way to further participate in the essence of erotic attraction.
Hmm. It's gorgeous, yeah. Activates you, activates your partner,
Mhm.
and all the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fire, man. Like the emphasis on the heat. Like I love that, man. What did you do with the tincture?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked about the tincture. This is the participation in the form of agape, and really leaning into the experience of more Aaronic forms of Aphrodite, whereas these previous ones are more enfleshed and more um, sort of visceral in that erotic way. This is a bit more focused, much to your your area of speciality of the purity and blessing of the deity upon you. Once you have transcended and gone beyond, the love of the flesh. What does it mean to have a love of the spirit, the love of the deity? So I made this tincture with a few different goals in mind. I wanted it to make you friendlier to spirits, to kind of remove the humanness that might inhibit the full congress and participation in the world of a spirit that is not human themselves, or not entirely human themselves, to walk among them and experience the love in the way that they are able to love you and you are able to love them in their own language. One of the other things is, I wanted to brighten intellect. I wanted to brighten spirit communication and other faculties of the senses and faculties of the mind in this way, to better, understand and enter into congress with all of these things, and to be able to experience the love by way of communion, to build that bond over time, and to facilitate a sort of impassioned, inflamed union of ideas and of belief and of mutual reciprocity and worship in this way. So, really, what I'm trying to do with this particular tincture is, upon its application to the body, or to the under the tongue, to instill a blessing of the gods, but a feeling that it can be kind of ripped out of you, for lack of a better term, to better understand the extremities of what it means to actually be participating in the essence of this divinity in a state of overwhelming purity, and to experience, the presence of the deity, and to feel the longing when they depart, but to feel the love of having had that encounter in the first place.
That's so beautiful. Oh, and I love the way that you ended up using motherwort to like remove the melancholy of the heart.
Yeah, yeah. So, the main herb that forms the basis of this tincture is actually motherwort, that I, went out into the woods at various points and foraged, because to build this tincture, I needed to have these very same encounters with the deities, or her emissaries that we had at the sanctuary. So I would pray and say, "Help me find these herbs." And I would go, and funnily enough, these trails of these blue flowers, these like vibrant blue, almost alien looking flowers, would emerge on trails that I would hike every day I'd never see before, through the woods one day, and lead off into a little grove where it's only these huge patches of motherwort growing. And I would go and, collect the amount that I need. And when the spirits would dictate, I would go out on these sort of pilgrimages again, and make offerings to the herbs and make offerings to the spirits, and say, "Thank you for guiding me to exactly what I needed, and only in the amount that I needed."
That's gorgeous. I love that you wild harvested it like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's, a hugely important part, because I wanted to capture that pilgrimage, the thing that really provoked our encounter with the goddess in the first place. And as you mentioned earlier, going back for motherwort as a herb that is used to remove the melancholic vapors from the heart, according to Culpeper, which I think is a beautiful metaphor for what is happening here. It is to flush those tensions, flush those anxieties out of the person that were removed from us at the temple. Of course, as well, it's to, going back to Aphrodite and all of the things that she participates in. It's to improve cheerfulness, to kind of settle the way that Culpeper puts it is to settle the wombs of mothers, but really to have this generative, almost capability to birth other things out of the use of this tincture, to birth ideas, to birth matter, to birth talismans, to go about all of these different applications. And to the point of having this tincture make one more friendly to spirits and be able to walk in their worlds better. One of the things that I really used in every step of the preparation of the tincture is the paw of a mouse that was used to collect various herbs or used to, bless the bottles in specific ways. Of course, relying on the motif of a mouse removing the needle from the paw of some predatory beast, be it a lion or otherwise, to make you friendlier to spirits and make spirits friendlier to you to participate in kind of this mutual I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine type of attitude.
Totally, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That's a very I would say salt technique, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Having him be the sort of confidant and sounding board of a lot of the ideas and a lot of the practical methodology of the construction of these things that really shows through here.
Hmm.
I mean, he says this, but the entire time, like, I'm just sat here listening to him deconstruct his plans, like going over them. I'm thinking, this fucking guy, man. He's got the good stuff in him.
You're like, that's my boy.
Go on, son.
Oh, thanks, Dad. Oh, fucking hell. I try to make all of the things I make reflect the profundity and depths of the love that I have for the spirits, saints, deities, whatever it may be, that are granting me the ability to consecrate these things in the first place. So I don't pull punches when it comes to materia. And of course, with that very sanctuary that we visited being a seat of so much metallurgical knowledge and so much botanical knowledge in terms of organic extraction in its earliest phases, if we want to call it what it is, or of perfumery of medicine making, we find it there in its echoes that persist to the present day. So
Hmm.
allowing that to kind of flow through me, move through um, the spirits of the materia, the way that they're processed, the way that they're given to participate in and then retrieve from the essences of various spirits, various, I shouldn't say various, but specifically the deity herself, Aphrodite, in this process are. I try to let it speak for itself.
And it does. I think that's a beautiful idea. Not and even more beautiful execution. The mouse's paw is also especially great, especially because we found one. Echoing the expedite adventure with like we need a crow, and then like 2 seconds later, someone joins the voice call on the server and is like, "Who's your neighbor?" And she's like, "Hey, Key, did you notice that there's like a dead crow outside your apartment that was like flattened by a car?" But
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
case, you got the mouse at a three-way crossroad.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Big Pharma
No,
cost key in his element.
Big Pharmakoski.
oh, that's a good one.
Mhm. So great. And there's one more oil, right?
Yeah, rounding out kind of the trinity or the trifecta, if you will, the oil Trismegistus, um, is the filia oil. This is for, as much as we have these kind of, um, more embodied erotic forms of love, and we have these more heavenly kind of agape or Aphrodite, Urania centered forms of love. I wanted to include something as well for people who wanted to know the extent and the virtue of the other forms of love that there are to experience in the world. Of course, on this pilgrimage, we went to as friends. We participated still in that essence of love and deepened that bond of friendship.
Hmm.
And so, what I wanted to do is capture that essence. So I made this oil especially good at finding new friends and finding colleagues, collaborators, business partners, things like that. In the world of occultism, people who share your interests and share your love of the art are few and far between. So I wanted to, of course, aid in that. But, I also wanted to have something in there that can be used in kind of peaceful home, if we want to use that analogy, type applications to repair familial bonds, repair problems in the home. all sorts of things of that nature. And something, of course, participating in this essence in the arcana of what it means to share a meal with someone else. This oil participates in kind of the methods of preparing oils for different saints or deities where they'll be heavily, heavily strained. So it will look just like olive oil, not really be particularly aromatic, kept about as sterile as the olive oil you would keep in your kitchen. So I'm not saying to put this in people's food. I'm just saying I would put this personally in my own food.
But it's such a good point. We made that a few times right on on the podcast, saying that like very traditional oils in many cultures, they're not going to be distinguishable by basically anything other than the base, right? It'll just look like olive oil. And that's a
Right.
good thing because you don't necessarily want it to look otherwise, especially if you're putting it in food or using it to shake hands or putting it in cooking or and so on and so forth, right? So that's great. But I think the thing that's so brilliant about this oil is how you made it through the bottle itself as like the receptacle of the love of friendship. And as all many of us are many of our people listeners even comments on our relationship and our friendships and stuff like that and are like, oh, like I really want to meet more occultists. I really want, and for some of you, you have, through our server now, but you also are interested in like making really quality connections to spirits and making yourself more likable to spirits too, especially the ones that are very finicky. So I think this oil will do a really good job of helping you be more pleasant to the spirits that are a bit more finicky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very much so in a unique way when compared to the agave tincture as well, where that might be used in a case where if some spirit is like completely wilding out and malefically oriented toward you, you can use that to kind of placate and pacify them. Whereas with the filia oil, now that it's like what we say with the grimoire work. You've done the conjuration, now the relationship begins. So this is for the phase in which that relationship begins.
I want to hear all about what it was like for the bottle though, because you previewed this in our Discord server when we were on that voice call.
Yeah, so the way that I went about the construction of this oil is kind of unique in terms of other things that I've made before, because I'm a very chemistry forward person in that I'm like um you know I want a substance in a crucible that is being cooked and that things are being infused into. There's a lysate, if you will. There is a menses that I'm extracting off the top and doing all these different things. But this was really the inverse of that, as directed by spirits. For most of the time that this oil has been in construction, as it were, there was nothing in the bottle. So, and what I mean by that is the consecrations that are done to the oil, the blessings that are conferred, are done by prayers that are said into it. Things that happen in my life where I'm like, I am very happy about this friend, anchoring that idea into the bottle itself of what it means to have a profound friendship, putting, kind of the memory of the visit to the sanctuary of Aphrodite into the hands of spirits and allowing them to kind of manipulate that energy and manipulate that essence to blow their own blessings into the bottle. The songs that are whistled over the top as though the bottle itself is a flute to burn different things and fumigate the inside of the bottle and to then wash it with different infused tinctures and alcohols and waters in this way to light it on fire even at one point, which is very fun to show the intensity of different things, to have kind of a
Mhm.
barking dog experiment happen inside of it. um, and yeah, really going all out so that the second that the oil touched the bottle, all of those virtues were conferred into it. And so I only needed to do a little bit of doctoring after the fact to get different ratios of things right, and then strain it and bottle it again and do all that work.
Beautiful. It's so cool too that it was just prayers upon gratitude for friends, for relationships with spirits that went into it over so long. until the actual oil and all of its materia came together into it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Or you're like burning incense into the bottle and like with a stick inside and like swirling it around and like praying. Yeah.
Or even, burning an incense that we'll talk about in a little bit into it to, really cement that essence of what it means to have made this pilgrimage to strengthen a friendship to the temple.
Mm-hmm.
But before even that, I really wanted to get into my labor of love over many years that I've had myriad discussion with other people, either on Instagram, on Discord, through other more private channels of communication. I've even had someone to email me about it. Shout out to that person. But that is the pigment. That is my
Yes.
oh man, this pigment is my baby, my labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
It came after some chemical research about making different salts and different pigments with copper. Having this methodology of making a copper carbonate salt to, of course, have its famous kind of blue green, seafoam green, even color, um,
Mm-hmm.
harkening back to the foam-born lady who patrons the work. But I really wanted to have something that reflects her patronage, not only of love, but of coppersmithing, copper refining, and even in the abstract, the art of alchemy. Of course, our name copper, our periodic table symbol, Cu for cupric, for copper, harkening back to Cyprus.
Mm-hmm.
Kubrick, of course, meaning of Cyprus. And, I wanted to have that heritage there. So I whipped up a pigment that is, of course, her own green in color. And it is used, infused into different oils, mold. I've had good results mulling it into sweet almond oil and also a variety of the aforementioned oils this episode, which, suggested use case there to mull it on using like a kind of like a paint muller or like a pestle and mortar to really, make this pigment and inscribe all manner of spirit seals, to write petitions, to make votive art. When we were in Cyprus, as Finga mentioned earlier, we had picked up these kind of gesso or plaster cruciform fertility goddess statues. So mine I painted in this pigment entirely, and
Mm-hmm.
it really helps to confer that virtue for the chemistry nerds and not so chemistry nerds listening. This reaction that creates this pigment itself is beautiful because it causes a double replacement to occur where the pigment is synthesized in an instant as soon as they're mixed, and it falls out of the water as this beautiful green color. The thing that's left behind in solution is the key component of natron.
Mm-hmm.
So the pigment, as it falls out, is washed ritually in this beautiful union of the substance and the thing that purifies
Zosimus himself is shedding a tear of joy on hearing this.
it. Yeah, right. And of course, Zazimos citing my own alchemical teachers as his preferred ancient Near East writers on the art of alchemy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gorgeous. So it is, I appreciate you mentioning as well because of the copper sulfate. Pentahydrated is not skin safe, so this is not something to put on like eyeshadow, for example. But you
Yeah,
could totally, you could have it on skin, but it wouldn't be something to put on the face, like in the eyes.
yeah, I would just be careful with it. With any copper salts, of course, they're not going to be as poisonous as like a Paris green or something like that.
Hmm.
But or any arsenic leaching green pigments out there. Um, yeah, don't put this on your face. Anywhere else, probably fine for a little while. Um,
Yeah. But it's for
I
painting. It's for painting sigils and scribing. Yeah.
right. I've even been playing around with the idea of making chalks out of this, so more on that to come. but not for today.
And he's not done yet, people. There's one more, and it's the incense. To recreate the very smell that we smelled when she came to us in that beautiful form at Temple that we kept teasing earlier in the episode.
Yeah. This is a beautiful incense, a beautiful fragrance that, of course, was burnt into the bottle of the Philia oil. But really, what I wanted to do is to have something that brings into the present that experience that we had, that anchors it into the room that we're in, the time that we are saying the prayers, and to really feel the deity. So of course there were a couple distinctive notes within this incense that led me to the PGM. And Svinga, you did me a huge favor of highlighting PGM4 2891 to 2942 itself being called Love Spell of Attraction, but it contains an incense recipe that is said to be the offering to the star of Aphrodite.
A white dove's blood and fat, untreated myrrh, and parched wormwood. Make this up together as pills and offer them to the star on pieces of vine, wood, or on coals. And also have the brains of a vulture for the compulsion, so that you might make the offering, and also have a protective charm. A tooth from the upper right jawbone of a female ass, or of a tawny sacrificial heifer, tied to your left arm with a Nubian thread.
And I wanted to say, thank you to Apollonia of Timna's serving woman for
Yeah, sister of the traveling donkey, because you do indeed have a tooth from the upper right jawbone of a female ass.
right. So it's beautiful how that worked out. It's almost as if the spirits have influenced it.
And I got you the white dove's blood and fat. You had untreated myrrh. You had the parched wormwood, and the incense recipe. Inadvertently, I mean, when I found this PGM fragment, I was like, "Wait a second, it seems a little bit familiar."
Mhm. And so, having all of these things at hand, I cooked up a batch using all of the prayers that are given, and
Everything except the brains of the vulture, but that's the compulsion part anyway.
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I don't need to compel the deity to show up because we already have, other pacts that facilitate that congress and can call upon that authority without the use of such a difficult to obtain piece of material. But the composition of the uh, offering incense itself being what it is, I whipped it up and I'm like, this is so close to the incense that is being offered here. So I added a couple, extra herbal components and a number of other things that are informed by the very alchemists and perfumers that we met at that temple. And I decided to offer it to everyone. And so with the virtues of this incense being used to um, you know, compel the for those who do not necessarily have the same pacts that were, brokered as we mentioned earlier in the episode, wanted to pass along kind of the same PGM compulsions and hymns for use with this instance. But yeah, so know that there is a compulsion that is given in the PGM that comes along with this particular instance.
Yeah, but it's so not necessary for this, especially because you don't need the vulture brains to compel the goddess. That said, though, it is a really interesting prayer to read. I highly recommend looking at it. It's again PGM 4 2891 to 2942. And it does indeed contain the Acti Ofiereshkegal Neboto Soalet, 3 names of Hecate that are also associated with Aphrodite, popularized, of course, by Jason Miller in his Hecate work. And here it also refers to Aphrodite as Kitere, right?
Yeah. The foam-born Kiteria.
And yeah, and it's a Cyprus-born as well. It has a lot of really cool epithets to her that I highly recommend people check out. Roso as well, Barsa.
Genuinely fantastic conjuration. Recommended to those who want to experiment.
And beautifully done. Absolutely masterful work. Speaking of the PGM, there are two talismans, you might say, that I've created as part of this collection from the PGM. One is specifically the famous Stele of Aphrodite. This is PGM 7, 215 to 18. Very, very simple stuff. It is a stele to gain friendship, favor, success, and friends. You take a strip of tin and you engrave it with a bronze stylus, and you must be pure while carrying it. What pure means in the PGM is, of course, depends, it can mean that you haven't had sex recently. It could mean that you haven't had alcohol or you haven't eaten meats. It could be fasting during daylight hours. It's not necessarily, that I believe between you and your spirits, what that means for you necessarily. But these are small engraven tin with a bronze stylus, as it says. And specifically, they are blessed in the day and hour of Venus, uh, anointed with water that has gone through these 7 holes. I did that for all of my enchantments, is specifically pouring seawater through the 7 holes of the 7 hagstones that were, fed not only doves, but were also fed, love and devotion and prayer as this aniconic representation of her as our Betel, right? Naming as going through the spheres of reality until it gets to the densest part of matter, So these are, typically quite simple to make. Like obviously, like I encourage folks to make these themselves because they're meant to be about the size that you could fit in a credit card slot within your wallet and take it with you. Again, for friendship, for favor, success, for friends. But these also underwent numerous other conjurations. So like this is not just out of the PGM, this also underwent a lot of personal elevation and practice at my shrines, and again received a kind of birthing ceremony as well. So these are, there'll be 21 of these available, and it's quite simple. It's one of the more inexpensive items, I suppose you could say, out of the ones that I produce, because they're meant to be quite, simple. And I hope that it brings. Yeah, my wish is to bring a little bit of the Aphroditean magics from the PGM as well to this collection. And then I've also done, now these are not technically linked to Aphrodite herself, but they are from the PGM. It is PGM 36, 256 to 64. This is a pretty famous one, right? All 3 of us have done these before. Assault knows that if I'm at a crossroads and I see a potsherd, it's over.
The lens flare when she sees them. It's
Literally.
It's like a sniffer dog.
Yeah. I turn around and I'm like, what was that? Was that possibly a triangular potsherd? So the PGM itself says taking a 3-cornered sherd from the fork of a road, pick it up with your left hand and inscribe it with myrrh ink and then hide it. And you write a conjuration that also includes your name. It says, your name, and then it says, I conjure you by the great and terrible names, and so on, which the winds fear and the rocks split when they hear it. And then there's symbols that go on top. So this, the main thing that was necessary was the 3 corners, so a triangular potsherd at the fork of a road. We found a very small amount of these. We found 7 exactly, much like the hagstones, of these beautiful potsherds on the beach and by the temple. And so these ones I picked up with my left hand if they were at a crossroads. And we took them back and we inscribed them. Now, if you purchase one of these, I will write your name. It can be the name that goes on your PayPal receipt. If you want a different one, please just include in an email or in a message that you want a different name. I will reach out to you otherwise. And so this will be perfumed for you, prayed over for you. And when you receive it, I would hide it somewhere. I would bury it in your yard if you have one. I would put it in a literal like plant pot, or you would put it away somewhere in your home to give you protection. And so the idea being that I specifically enchanted these with Aphrodite and will specifically submit your prayers before my shrine, with the intention being that this is a little piece of history, as it were, right? And it provides an even greater boost, I think, than the original, because I have one of these for myself, right? And it is much, much more boosted, I would say, than the ones that I happen to have for, that I've just found of like pottery sherds, here that I've located in the city in which I live. So I wanted to have 7, I think it's, thematic to have 7 of these, available for people to purchase. They'll be strictly and specifically for protection and allowing you to have this kind of notion of Hecatian and Aphroditean will over your home, over your place of business, over your spirits, to ensure that, again, no matter where misfortune comes, it is averted and kept sealed under the auspices of all of those who have ever ventured to that pilgrimage site in prayer to her. But the pièce de résistance, the one that, you know, you can see that he put a lot of effort to make a lot of different things. I've made 3. 2 of them are from the PGM, and the third is the one that took. I don't even know how to put it. This was like the most amount of effort I think I put into something that and that's saying something given to Master Wolves Shrine amulets, right?
Yeah. Like I was saying to some of the people who happened to be online when we were teasing this a little bit in the Patreon Discord. Um, these particular talismans received about as much, if not more, work in terms of effort and in terms of hours, just like raw hours of work put into them, as all of the aforementioned oils, tinctures, balms, pigments, incenses. So if that sounds like a lot, but know that these are just as much, if not more.
Honestly, like I can't even be modest and like say it's not true. Like it actually, they took a lot out of me. They are the eyes of the Ferrieri. These are ensouled spirit charms. Every part of their construction was dictated to me by the spirits that wish to go into them. They are made of hagstones that I collected on the trip, that I washed in those very same waters, that received offerings there, that have been bathed in countless different waters, as well as different kinds of animal milks, as well as blood, that have been offered to it over many different months. Every single Friday they received veneration. Every single month on the full moon they received a boost. They were sank to, they were cradled, they were protected from the sunlight and so on. Like these took a very long time to get ready for what they're meant to do. And namely, what happened was on the beach, I had communication with some of the spirits and some of mine that were negotiating certain kinds of pacts between us. And one of the things that was made clear to me was that this feeling of these nymphs carrying her from the rock to the beach, that some of them wanted to come with us, and specifically that they wanted to actually be called upon to assist others in not only the cultivation of blessings and of love and of journeying and of creating a sort of permanent link to this very place, but specifically they wanted to be present to assist and to share sort of like those blessings with others. So these are fetishes for nymph spirits. There's only a very limited amount of them made. Obviously, because there was only so many hexstones that I specifically bathed, and also everything had to be elected through divination. So originally, when I thought of making fewer, they demanded more. When I thought of making more, they demanded less. So even the final number of how many it is that they were made is a certain amount, and some had to be given to friends, before they could even be sold. And others insisted that they wished to go out to other sorcerers, witches, and magicians out there. So I would not purchase this unless you are ready to take care of a spirit. These have literal beings attached to them. This is not like a charm that isn't spirited. This is genuinely a vessel for a spirit. And they had a very simple design for what they wanted. I thought about putting the hexstones into like bags and sewing them up. I thought about having them, on fetishes. I even considered stringing them up on string to look like loom weights, because in the museum at Paphos there's this gorgeous loom with all these drilled stone weights that we thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to make some like this with hexstones and so on. But they had a very particular design in mind. They wanted to be on a prayer rope of 7x7 with a mother of pearl with a garnet. The garnet color actually matches what the hagstones ended up looking like after they had spent a lot of time in macerating, essentially, in red wine, in powdered doves, in freshly sacrificed dove blood, clots and viscera, Venus rising in Pisces powders that Salt elected, and many other things that have to be unfortunately not named, including animal, vegetable, and mineral materia. And so these sat in a copper bowl at my Venus shrine for a very long time, and they were continually refreshed, so that obviously the wine itself would not mold. And having, finally inoculated the environment necessary for them, the gasp of breath that came through in each of the hagstones that is an amulet to these spirits was water that was poured directly through each of these 7 stones into these stones themselves to kind of complete the circuit. So these are not stones that are to be handled lightly. They are living spirit vessels. They're not necklaces. They're too short to be worn over the head. They are a prayer rope to be handled gently. And I would highly recommend that if you have one, to be very gentle with it. This is a living spirit. You can place it on the shrine. They will be given to you in velvet pouches, so you can certainly keep them in there, or you could take them out and place them by the bedside, keep them specifically in a place of work, or or by any other location in which they could receive offerings and proper veneration. The reason for the prayer rope design is partially, on the one hand, to look a little bit like an Orthodox prayer rope, on my end, because some Balkan folk magical techniques did indeed go into the installing of these spirits, as they were negotiated by certain ancestors and spirits of my own. So that is reflected in the way that Orthodox prayer ropes look a little bit like Buddhist malas in some ways. So that is why it's less like a rosary design, it's more like a full rope. But each of the mother of pearl are flanked by little carnelian beads, and then there are 7 garnets in a rope of 7. So there's 7 mother of pearls, there's 14 of the carnelian pieces, and then there's 49 of the garnets. So, and it's tied together on a red beading thread. So please be gentle with it. This is a heavier, beaded item, and it is doubly reinforced, so it will not break. But either way, I highly recommend that you be careful with them. What you're meant to do with them is to drape the beads, pray around, intone the Feriere's name, intone different epithets to Aphrodite over each of the beads, anoint it with oils, even some of Key's oils, like whisper through it your prayers into the hagstone hole, and then drape it over work that you're doing, over a candle, over incense, over any kind of bowl that you're offering things into. And the idea being that the rope itself is the cervix that is going to birth the holiness of the working that you're doing. And you can even fold the hagstone into the middle to show that it's passing through the divine, nous, as it were. It's incarnating, to kind of be a little Neoplatonic about it, into the world and through the womb. And so this is a rope of creation. These nymphs who brought the goddess's feet from the foam into the beach itself, they are especially they were the ones that were the friendliest, that wanted to work the most with new people. They wanted to actually be out there into the world and make compacts with new magicians. So more information will be provided to those who end up taking some of these home. I am enforcing a strict limit of 1 per person. So with other things, you can buy multiples of the oil, you can buy multiples of the pigment and so on. But like with this, it's purely 1 per. Even if if you want to buy more than 1, it should go to a different person. And I recommend checking with your spirits first that this is appropriate to bring one to you. This is not a matter of just me feeling like I wanted to share this with the world. This is also an effective responsibility, right? That these are spirits that wish to work with others. And so you should definitely, if you're feeling called to them, if the story touched you and you wanted to bring a piece of this home with you, I would highly encourage you to check it with your spirits first, because if the answer is a no, there are many other things that Key and I have made that would connect you nevertheless to the goddess, right? But like these are specifically familiars and emissaries of Aphrodite. They are her nymphs born in her service who work as her priestesses. And each will reveal their name to you in time. And each has their own distinct personality and come with their own equipment and workings. And they have, nicknames as well that I will give to you individually, depending on the one that chooses you. But, their true names will be revealed to you in time as you work with them. So you can drape this over workings. You can use it to crown candles and incense smoke to kind of like pull the energy of the goddess and this nymph through it to bring things into manifestation. Everything under Venus's purview is under the purview of these spirits. But what they do especially well is they bridge that gap between quite literally as diamonds, right? As a paredros, like between the crowning of the deity's will and its manifestation on earth, they do the daimonic intercessory work of bringing it to us. And so these I'm scratching the surface in terms of like what actually went into consecrating them, because I have to be very secretive about what were all the rituals involved. But I will say Key is not wrong that it took a lot of man hours over many, many months to get these to the point where they were ready, and they are now completely done. And I think that, they turned out very beautifully. I wanted to bling them up even more. Like I honestly wanted to do like more pearl, more this, more that. I want to do more stones. I want to lengthen them and so on and so forth. But they were very adamant that it should be something to hold gently and to place over workings. They want to be worked. So if you take these spirits in, just know they will want to do magic with you. They will want to engage in the work of manifesting joy in your life, and they will also, kind of push back against you if you are engaging in practices that are contrary to that. If you are being irresponsible or if you're not being accountable to your own agency, they will integrate into your court and start restructuring a few things. But at the same time, if you have very strong spirits that are your patrons that are advocating and saying this would be a great ally to have, know that they will be differential to your patrons. Like this is not a spirit that will try and become your main, as it were, because they understand the rank and file of other courts. But I would consult your spirits first. And if you're feeling like already like your spirits are saying, yes, this is an ally I want, I don't even need to check necessarily, that you're getting a good go ahead from them, then I leave it in your capable hands. And obviously you will be free to email me and ask for advice on use, after purchase and so on. I will provide with you some tips and I will give you the nickname to the individual nymph that chose you. But otherwise, the rest is completely within your capacity to work with them. And I recommend, of course, giving them an offering as often as you do for the rest of your spirits, and welcoming them into your home with plenty of incense. Keys obviously works fabulously with this, right? If you really want the full effect of what that was like. But they are very much alive, and they wanted to be in these prayer rooms because they wanted to engage you in the practice of praying to the gods with them. So they are themselves intercessors, and I'm very, very privileged and honored to have been a midwife for their journey into the world. I was not expecting to make something like this. I knew I wanted to make certain fetishes and talismans, and I thought, oh, I could make something very similar to the St. George ones I made recently, like in charm bags and so on. And it could contain hagstones, but the outside could be green, for example. I was very much kind of thinking along those lines. But they insisted on this particular prayer rope design to kind of bridge some of my own cultural influence, as well as to create this something that you could wrap around your wrist, with holding the palm in your hand, especially in the left hand, with the pinky curled in, where the blood vessels flow from your heart directly into your hand, into the stone. Each is different. There's going to be some discoloration, obviously, from the way that they were soaking, and that's just how I like it. I'll put it this way, salt, obviously you've been around them, you know that they have a very strong presence and that there is a trembling that accompanies them. So I would ask that they be treated with the utmost respect and they be welcomed as the friends and honorable allies that they will be.
Honestly, yeah, like the presence of the spirits is, and I feel like in particular, like you can get their sense of mission, if that makes sense. Like when they're around, like there's a definite mission from them, and it's something that is very much participant in the goddess herself and her will and everything like that. Like they're wonderful.
And they all pass the requisite divination checks through my spirits to make sure, in terms of loyalty, in terms of friendship, camaraderie, trustworthiness, and so on. So I take it very, very seriously. I don't often do something like this where I offer and sold fetishes, but with these, it had to be perfect, and I'm very, very glad to say that, I get a little bit crazy with some of my standards, I would say, but these, as the kind of crown jewel of the collection. I think these turned out exactly the way I wanted them to. So you have the oil of Nefertiti, the balm of Eros, the tincture of agape, the oil of Philia, the Venusian pigment, the sanctuary of Paphos incense, the eyes of Nefertiti, prayer ropes with their ensouled nymphs, the potsherds of protection, and the Stelia Aphrodite for friendship, favor, success, and friends. There were so many other things that we considered doing. This is what passed the divination check. There'll be much more Aphrodite stuff from us in the future. Key and I are already thinking about some Black Venus stuff. We're thinking about some, like Archangel Anael stuff that we're thinking of doing. Something like, pentacles and copper and so on. There's a lot on our minds. We're nowhere near done, but this is wanted to be the flagship launch of our love for the goddess and our love for each other and our love for this every single spirit that helped made this trip and all that happened on it possible.
I think the expression labor of love is finally done justice here. Um, we have you know toiled away for months and months on end, um, devoting huge swaths of our sorceress and otherwise magical practices to it, as well as our more devotional and theurgic efforts. And I'm glad to finally release them into the world, to allow them to fly the nest, and really to disseminate our own love of the goddess herself into the world.
Indeed. Well, that's what we got for you, Salt.
Wow, that was an adventure. That was right there.
And you know the more of it. Like you actually are privy
Yeah.
to all the stuff we can't even say.
Truly, yeah. Like, it's the devotion involved in this. Like
Does it make your ritual purity heart happy?
it does. It swells. It swells.
Excellent. You are the oral charm king. We all know it. We've all seen it. You know, when you sing and pray to the spirits, Key and I weep a little bit, and that means a lot coming from you.
See, Singer says this, but she's the one who was blessed with divine theophany and visions.
Well, you know what, it was for the both of us, and one of the nymphs insisted on going with you, Salt. So you have one of your own that immediately on the beach was like, literally to my face, was like, for your lover. Like, I wish to go with him.
Much gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's our journey, or at least the 40% of it we can share with just this chapter of the trip, just that one day in Cyprus that ended up becoming 6 months of laboring over this project and a lifetime of pacts, from here on out.
Mhm.
But thank you all so much for listening to this monstrously long episode. Let's close it up with the Akashic Records. Not a shock at all that I've chosen Bettina Joy de Guzman's Aphrodite renditions. She's an amazing classicist and musician who does excellent recreations of hymns and different kind of fragments. So her Sappho's Fragment 1 to Aphrodite is a must listen, as well as her invocation to Aphrodite. And I'm also adding in the song Aphrodite by Honey Gentry. I know I chose ones that actually have the goddess's name in them. We didn't have to. Obviously, that wasn't a rule. We just chose to. Because it's she should be exalted. Even our last episode, we ended off the license to depart was literally the Orphic hymn to Venus.
Yeah. We there were some pretty funny pre-episode discussions being like, we didn't go with the Orphic hymn to Venus for this episode, so let's find something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, of course, Aphrodite by Honey Gentry is a fantastic selection for the Akashic record today. I'm very happy for that shout.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the work of Bettina Joy de Guzman is foreminent in the world of ancient hymns to the deities that we so cherish and love. One of the ones I wanted to always throw into the mix is, of course, Peter Pringle's "The Exaltation of Inanna" in Sumerian.
Peter Pringle's our man, dude. Like he's always here, and the Hittite jump scare meme. It's actually just him with the Epic of Gilgamesh. Has been a recurring theme on the podcast.
Yeah, genuinely. But including him today as exalting the virtue of the Inanna, the cognate of Aphrodite, and their closely and inextricably linked cultic practices throughout the ancient Near East.
Different goddesses, and yet also all the more happy to come together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and become
yeah.
linked, as often happens with these deities, especially in Egypt, right, and in Sumeria.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But, bringing it all the way home, our license to depart today is, of course, Sappho's hymn to Aphrodite, as translated by Elizabeth van de Veer.
Iridescent throned, Aphrodite, deathless, child of Zeus, wild weaver, I now implore you, don't, I beg you, lady, with pains and torments, crush down my spirit. But before, if ever you've heard my pleadings, then return, as once when you left your father's golden house, you yoked to your shining car your winged-wearing sparrows. Skimming down the paths of the sky's bright ether, on they brought you over the earth's black bosom, swiftly. Then you stood with a sudden brilliance, goddess, before me. Deathless face alight with your smile, you asked me what I suffered, who was my cause of anguish, what would ease the pain of my frantic mind, and why had I called you to my side, and whom should persuasion summon here, to soothe the sting of your passion this time? Who is now abusing you, Sappho? Who is treating you cruelly? Now she runs away, but she'll soon pursue you. Gifts she now rejects, soon enough she'll give them. Now she doesn't love you, but soon her heart will burn, though unwilling. Come to me once more and abate my torment. Take the bitter care from my mind and give me all I long for, lady. In all my battles, fight as my comrade.
The freak sex you'll be having.